Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Voltaire. One of the most powerful tools ever devised is not a weapon, not money, not even force. It is the ability to determine which questions may be asked and which questions must never be entertained. For throughout history, societies have always possessed ideas that are considered respectable, and others that are treated with suspicion before they are even examined. And few labels in the modern world carry more weight than one in particular: conspiracy theory. To be called a conspiracy theorist is not merely to be accused of being wrong. It is to be portrayed as irrational, paranoid, detached from reality, someone whose views deserve ridicule rather than investigation. But perhaps the first question worth asking is a simple one. What exactly is a conspiracy? Because stripped of all emotion and political baggage, a conspiracy is simply two or more people acting together in secret to abuse power or break the law. And a conspiracy theory is merely an explanation proposing that such a conspiracy may have occurred. It may be true, it may be false, but until evidence proves or disproves it, it remains a possibility. And history teaches that conspiracies themselves are not rare exceptions. They are as old as civilization. Kings have conspired, generals have conspired, corporations have conspired, intelligence agencies have conspired, political leaders have conspired. Human nature has not changed simply because society has become more technologically advanced. Interestingly, while conspiracies are ancient, the phrase conspiracy theory is relatively modern, and over time something peculiar happened. What began as a description gradually evolved into a weapon. Not a weapon used to investigate ideas, but a weapon used to dismiss them. Because once a person receives a label, discussion becomes easier to avoid. Arguments no longer need to be addressed. Evidence no longer needs to be considered. The label itself performs the work. The individual becomes the story, not the question being raised, and this transformation proved remarkably effective. Over time, those who challenged official narratives were increasingly portrayed as unstable, paranoid, extremist, or simply crazy, not because every alternative explanation was correct, but because ridicule itself became a substitute for debate. Yet history offers a reminder that should make every thoughtful person pause. Political conspiracies do occur. Watergate was not imaginary. Iran-Contra was not imaginary. Governments have lied. Corporations have lied. Financial institutions have lied. Wars have been justified through misinformation. Scandals have emerged that many once dismissed as impossible. And while such events do not prove every theory to be true, they do demonstrate something far more important. Power does not eliminate human corruption. It merely magnifies its consequences. Human beings often comfort themselves with a reassuring belief. Surely, if something truly sinister were happening, someone would expose it. Someone would leak the documents. Someone would speak out. Surely large secrets cannot remain hidden. But history provides examples suggesting otherwise. There have been operations involving thousands of individuals that remained concealed for years. There have been programs known only to a select few, and there have been scandals that surfaced decades after the damage had already been done. The assumption that powerful institutions are incapable of secrecy rests less upon evidence and more upon faith. Perhaps the greatest mistake is not believing too much, nor is it believing too little. It is surrendering the responsibility to think, because both blind trust and blind suspicion are forms of intellectual laziness. One accepts everything, the other rejects everything. Wisdom demands something harder: discernment, the willingness to examine evidence without becoming emotionally attached to conclusions, the courage to remain open without becoming gullible, and the humility to admit uncertainty when certainty cannot yet be justified. Modern systems of influence have also evolved. Control no longer requires chains. It rarely announces itself openly. The most effective forms of power are often subtle. They shape perception, direct attention, reward conformity, and discourage uncomfortable questions. Not necessarily through censorship alone, but through social pressure, through ridicule, through reputational consequences, because few people fear prison, but many fear isolation, many fear being laughed at, many fear becoming outsiders, and so countless individuals silence themselves long before anyone else has the opportunity. Perhaps this is why labels possess such power, because labels relieve us of the burden of thinking. They transform complicated questions into simple categories: good people, bad people, experts, crackpots, believers, deniers, conspiracy theorists, and once the label is accepted, curiosity quietly dies. But truth has never cared about labels. Truth does not become false because unpopular people speak it, and falsehood does not become true because respectable people defend it. Reality remains indifferent to reputation. History also reveals another uncomfortable pattern. Open tyranny is easy to recognize. The dictator, the prison camp, the marching armies, the obvious chains. But perhaps modern societies have discovered something more sophisticated, something more selective, a system in which most people feel free while the most important levers remain tightly controlled. A society where intervention is rare but strategically placed, where perception itself becomes the battlefield, where narratives are managed not through overwhelming force, but through carefully directed influence. Not everywhere, only where it matters most. And perhaps that form of control is far more difficult to recognize precisely because it appears so ordinary. None of this means every conspiracy theory is true. Far from it. Some are absurd, some are distractions, some are born from fear, confusion, or the human tendency to impose patterns where none exist. But rejecting foolish theories does not require rejecting the possibility of conspiracy itself. To do so would be to deny history, and history has repeatedly shown that corruption thrives where scrutiny disappears. Power has always sought protection. Kings sought it, empires sought it, corporations seek it, governments seek it, and those who benefit most from the status quo rarely welcome uncomfortable questions, because suspicion directed upward has always been dangerous, not because it is necessarily correct, but because it threatens the security of those who possess authority. Perhaps the health of a society depends not upon universal trust, nor upon universal suspicion, but upon something much rarer, vigilance. A population willing to think independently, a population unwilling to outsource its judgment entirely to institutions or personalities, a population capable of asking difficult questions without losing itself in paranoia. Because freedom has never depended upon perfect rulers, such rulers have never existed. Freedom has always depended upon imperfect citizens who understand a timeless truth. Power corrupts, and human beings, regardless of title or status, remain human, capable of greatness, capable of deception, capable of virtue, capable of betrayal. And because this will always be true, the responsibility to question can never be surrendered. For civilizations rarely lose their freedom overnight. They lose it gradually, one unquestioned assumption at a time, one uncomfortable question left unasked, one act of complacency after another, until eventually, the chains that once would have been resisted are mistaken for normality itself.